All right, what is up, ladies and gents? Jason Ward, Ward's Way to Fitness here, coming at you with another video. Before I get going, I just want to say please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your comments below for any future topics you'd like me to cover. Today's topic, though, is what is the carnivore diet? I'll give you some of my thoughts, some pros, some cons, and just a little general discussion. So number one, for those who do not know, the carnivore diet is an animal-based diet. So a lot of people think it means that you have to exclusively eat meat, and for a lot of people that's a great place to start. So a lot of people will just do steak and maybe some eggs, and that's their whole diet to start off. Now for most people this is an elimination diet, and it has some benefits in that respect. If you have any food sensitivities or allergies and you're trying to figure out which foods you're reacting to, the meat is one that for the majority of people you will have no reaction. Now eggs, dairy, and other animal-based products you could have reactions to, so starting with say just red meat is a great place to start. So that's the carnivore diet. Everybody's specific needs are going to vary quite a bit, so you do have to understand that. So the average man's probably going to need to eat around 2 pounds of meat a day on the carnivore diet, and the average woman's probably going to be around 1.5. Now these will vary based on your activity level, your size, and you'll have to play around to kind of figure out what feels best for you, but that's the carnivore diet in a nutshell right there. So obviously this is a protein and fats only diet. You might be like, well, wait, isn't that keto? No, keto is not carnivore. You could be a keto carnivore, that is possible, but the intake of protein would need to be much lower. So a misconception a lot of people have about keto is that it is a high fat, high protein diet, when in actuality it is a high fat, low protein, very low carbohydrate diet. You shouldn't be getting more than about 20% of your calories from protein on keto. So that's how carnivore differs from keto. The other thing is that as you advance with your carnivore diet, you can start reincorporating some fruits and vegetables as they are tolerated. The idea with the carnivore diet is that you're going to basically get most of your nutrition from meat. Okay? Now, you may think, well, that can't be right. You can't get all the nutrients that you need from meat. And there is still a great deal of debate, and there's no scientific literature to support it, but there does seem to be a very growing community that is eating exclusively meat and thriving on it. And basically all of the nutrients that you need are in the meat. The only exceptions that people will commonly bring up are fiber, right, and vitamin C. So there are two things that people think that we need that it seems are not actually necessary for health and longevity for everyone. Okay, so the more foods that you're eating, the more likely you may need to increase your fiber intake, and the more carbohydrate you take in, the more vitamin C you need. So that kind of, you're not eating any carbohydrate really on a carnivore diet, so the need for vitamin C seems to be lower. We've got people that I have seen online, anecdotes, I will admit, they're N equals ones, but it's still, they have been following carnivore for 10 plus years and they do not have scurvy. And that is a pretty good indication that they're getting enough vitamin C. If we only had people who were like a year, 2 years, maybe even 5 years, it might not be as believable, but if you've got people who are 10 plus years essentially just eating meat, who are thriving still, do not have scurvy, then you have to question whether or not maybe our recommendations for the intake of vitamin C are wrong. I will say, in terms of the RDAs, our understanding of what the body needs varies based on our dietary intake, based on our different activities. If you're highly active in the gym, this will change what you need. If you are doing a lot of cardio, this will change what your needs are. If you're not very active, your needs will be different, right? So there is an interaction of all of the different foods that we take in as well, and so those things will affect how your body absorbs food. This is important to consider all of these things. So let's get into some of the pros for the carnivore diet. So from my view, carnivore, it's pretty easy to follow. to be honest. Like, all you got to do is eat meat. Like, is it meat? You can't have it. There could not be a simpler dietary strategy, right? I mean, and as I said earlier, you obviously do not have to stick to exclusively meat. You can have eggs, cheese, dairy as tolerated, and then you can start to reincorporate fruits and vegetables as you desire or tolerate. And it will be a bit of an experiment as you reintroduce those things. Next point. It is nutritionally replete. So that means that everything that you need is in meat. Or animal products in general. So all of the nutrition that we need on a day-to-day basis, you can get from animal products. And just combining them in the right way can increase how likely it is that you're hitting the minimum targets that are recommended by our RDAs. So that means you may have to eat some organ meats or like have a mixture of different types of meats. So eating chicken and beef, and like for the most part, they recommend that you eat ruminant animals, which I've talked about before, but ruminants are a much better source of many vitamins and minerals. And you should probably lean more towards grass-fed just from a sustainability standpoint. But it seems like if you're doing the grain-fed, you're not going to be any the worse for the wear. All right. So the next one's satiety. All right, so what I mean by satiety is you will feel full. And if you've been following me for any length of time that on any of my other social media channels, you know that I've talked about this before, but satiety, I think, comes in two forms. Number one, you're getting enough food that your stomach feels full, right? So you don't feel like you need to eat more food. The other satiety signal, I think, that often gets ignored is the nutritional side. So if you're not getting all of the vitamins and minerals that you need, you will likely continue to crave food. This is part of why processed foods are so difficult for people, because there's a lot of calories, but there's not a lot of nutrition. So you're not getting a lot of vitamins and minerals and the things that your body needs to perform on a day-to-day basis. I've actually been doing carnivore for most of this month. So it's January 2020 right now, and it is World Carnivore Month. I have had next to no cravings for the last 21, 22 days that I've been on the diet. And that's a first for me. I've never followed a diet in which I was in a caloric deficit and not had some cravings that I had to cope with. And now I'm getting a little bit closer to the end of the month. I'm starting to get a little bit more craving, but it seems to just be generalized. I want more food, right? So I feel like I'm not getting quite enough overall calories to support what I'm doing in the gym. So my next step is going to be to increase my intake a little bit and see if that takes care of the cravings. Now, that's a great tip for those people who are dieting. If you are starting to get extreme cravings, you're feeling the desire to binge, chances are you're being too restrictive, you don't have enough calories coming in, and you need to go and add a little bit more food to your day-to-day and see if that helps. Or in some cases, I might advise just a cheat meal so that you can keep doing what you've been doing. So the cheat meal can often give you just enough of a calorie boost that your body will stop having those cravings for another little while. It's another one of those little tricks that sometimes are a great tool for people to use. Again, just to recap, we've got satiety, all of the nutrients that we need. It's easy to follow. It's also actually easy to digest. So this is one where a lot of people will kind of question, right? If you tell them that you're doing carnivore, the first question almost always seems to be, well, how's your poop? And I'm like, all right, that's a pretty personal question, but it's fine. I'm not having any problems. Some carnivores I have read / seen have trouble initially as they're making the transition because their gut is not set up to digest exclusively meat. It's used to having to digest different types of foods that can have an impact on how well you digest. But once you are used to it and your body's producing the right bile and other acids and everything for your stomach, it gets very easy to digest the food, and you don't have a problem pooping, at least from most of the anecdotal evidence that I've seen from the many carnivores that are out there. So that kind of sums up the pros. So the cons. So this is where people kind of have differing opinions, obviously. So there's no research right now, scientific research that is, on the benefits of the carnivore diet. Okay, so there are lots of research studies out there on many different diets and like how they interact, and a lot of nutrition science though is not very good. It's basically just epidemiology, so they're comparing these these different diets without looking at all of the factors that could be affecting that as well. So people who tend to eat meat tend to smoke more, tend to drink more, tend to be less active. So when they look at these epidemiology studies and they see that people who eat red meat tend to have a higher incidence of heart disease, then they are like, oh, so red meat is correlated with heart disease. Now, most people misconstrue that to mean that red meat causes heart disease, and that is not the case. It's correlated with. There's lots of things that are correlated. Like there is a correlation, I believe it was with Nick Cage movies and drownings in swimming pools. So you can't tell me that Nick Cage movies cause people to drown in swimming pools. It's just an odd correlation that happens when you look at some data. So you have to take some of this information with a grain of salt. Randomized control trials are much better. They'll give you much better information, but we just don't have a lot of information on people who eat predominantly animal-based nutrition. Hopefully, in the coming years, we'll see more. I've heard that there is a study being done in Harvard University. Hopefully, it will get off the ground soon, and the ball can get rolling on that. I'd love to see some more information on how effective the diet is from a health perspective, where it's actually been investigated with a proper scientific reasoning. So there is the lack of current scientific evidence that we may have to cope with in regards to this diet. Okay, so next is the social stigma. So right now there is a huge plant-based movement started. Who knows when it all started? The Game Changers movie has definitely played a huge role in increasing people's awareness of plant-based nutrition, and I don't have a problem with that per se. What I do have a problem with is some of the misrepresentation of facts and how it has created an environment in which people think it's okay to tell people that eat meat that that's not okay, and I don't agree. I think that meat is an important part of the human diet. I believe that we're omnivores by nature, not carnivores. Which is why I think once you have reset your system, so to speak, you should start reincorporating fruits and vegetables, but they should be on an as tolerated basis. Everybody's needs are different, as I've said many, many times, and you have to understand that you need to kind of test yourself to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. And I'm not okay with the social stigma of eating meat, where people are like, they're basically saying that you're immoral, that your beliefs are wrong. And it's like, this diet is helping people be healthy. And if that is what it takes for you to be healthy, then I think you should keep doing that. If you're doing a vegan diet and you're healthy and you're thriving, I think you should keep doing that. If you're doing an omnivorous diet and you're thriving and you're healthy, keep doing it. The same thing for keto, paleo. I don't care what the dietary style is. You should just let people be. The social stigma side of it is unfortunate, but it is a potential con for the carnivore diet. So within that, there is also like going out to eat. There's not a lot of places where you could get just meat as a meal. But as I have said already as well, it's okay if you eat some vegetables here and there, eat some fruits, and enjoy some foods on occasion. Like, the idea is to have the bulk of your calories coming from animal-based sources, not necessarily to have exclusively animal-based sources. All right. So next up, you have limited food choices. So this is one that people will often say about vegan diets as well, and I think in both cases that you're ridiculous. It is not limited. Just as a vegan diet has many different options for different vegetables and fruits that you can take in, there are many different kinds of meat you can eat and different animal products, and you can mix and match them in many different ways. So to say that you're limited in your food choices is, I think, kind of misleading. There's definitely a limit, obviously, to the types of foods that you can choose. They need to be animal-based nutrition for the most part, incorporating fruits and vegetables perhaps later on down the road. But you do have to choose chicken, beef. There's lots of wild game. There's lots of different flavors out there, and nobody said you can't use spices. If you want to spice things up, change the way that your meat tastes, you can use garlics and salts, peppers, any spice you can think of. Herbs and stuff are just fine on a carnivore diet for most people. Some people do react to specific spices, herbs, and there are those who struggle to take in certain foods, and that's okay, right? Don't use those ones then, right? Find the ones that you don't react to that make you feel good and use those. All right? So, next up is a sustainability issue. So, a lot of people think that we can't sustain our population with current agricultural farming practices. And I actually agree, but I think that's true for both the vegetable farming and for our animal farming. I don't think that animal agriculture is the problem. I think if we were to be getting the right nutrition, stop wasting so much food, then we would be better off as a society. So there is a growing movement of sustainable farming practices. You have factory farms, obviously still there, trying to produce massive quantities of meat, and I don't think that's necessary. There's been a shift over the last 15, 20 years towards more sustainable practices, and I'm hoping that will continue. Renewable agriculture is the key, and cows can actually be very useful in a renewable agriculture system if you let them graze in a rotational pattern, so they move around plots of land. They never stick to one area for too long. There is some studies, albeit they're relatively new, indicating that they actually have a nearly net negative carbon footprint when allowed to graze in this fashion. They actually improve the soil. They'll increase how much vegetation can grow on that land. And so there is the potential that if we use these renewable agricultural practices, that we may be able to actually get more out of the land that we're already using. A lot of cattle also will graze on land that we can't grow any other crops on. So they could be eating grass in an area where there's just no other vegetation will grow. So it's not like they're taking up valuable land that we could be using for vegetable agriculture. So that being said, the sustainability argument is still there, and I do believe that we need to change how we obtain our food. As I said, I believe that's true across the board. It's not an exclusively carnivore problem. All right, and last but not least, the question that many people will often ask is, well, isn't that going to be too much protein? And I really struggle with this one because it's been my experience that most people are not eating enough protein in general anyway, and should really smarten up and try to eat a little bit more. If you want to be your healthiest, you should be eating a fairly significant amount of protein. There's a lot of talk right now about mTOR as well, and how protein it activates mTOR, and that mTOR has been shown to increase cancer cell growth. And it's not so black and white. People need to stop looking at individual pieces of the puzzle and look at the whole puzzle to try to figure out what's best. So saying that protein activates mTOR, well, that's not the whole picture. So does insulin. So that means that carbohydrates can activate mTOR. There are other growth factors in the body. So do we want to cut out protein and carbohydrate and just eat fat? I don't think that's a great idea. That's not going to give us all the nutrition that we need. We need to look at it as a system. All right? The human body is very complex. It needs a lot more than we think. Now, people are like, but isn't protein bad for your kidneys? No, it's not. All right? This myth needs to die. It has been pervasive for far too long. Even people with kidney issues don't necessarily have a problem with a reasonable protein intake. And a reasonable protein intake is not the RDA 0.8 grams per kilogram. That is an abysmally low number for protein. All right. Most people, especially if you're active, that is not going to give you anywhere near enough protein to continue to perform whatever activity it is you're trying to do. As I said in my protein talk, I think that we need at a minimum about 1 gram per pound, which is like over twice as much as the RDA. So what people need to understand about the RDAs, actually, you know what? That's probably best left for another video. I don't need to break into that right now. I've already been ranting for 20 minutes. So the short answer basically then is like, no, it's not going to be too much protein. There are some protein overfeeding studies that show some benefits to eating a lot of protein in terms of weight loss. There are obviously the benefits of increased muscle mass and feelings of satiety, making it an easier diet to follow, right? The protein is a non-issue really, and in the future I'll try to like get into the RDAs a little bit and why that's not necessarily where we should be looking for how much we need of things. So that's my breakdown of carnivore in a nutshell. I think hopefully that's been informative for you guys. Like I said, I've been following it for the better part of the last month. So for January, the only day I didn't was January 1st because I had a family dinner and I decided that I was going to have that as my last day of eating however I wanted. And then started to crack down on what I was putting into my body to improve how I feel, how I function, and also just to test and see if this carnivore thing is legit. Right? I've been doing a lot of research and I am thoroughly impressed both with what I have read, watched, and with what I am now experiencing. So hopefully you guys can take something away from this. If you have any questions, feel free to post them up below. All right, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and I will catch you guys in my next video.